Supposed to look at a screen. What is going on, guys? This is me, Trevor, RGN Gamer, joined by the one and only Jude. And we will be reacting to my first reaction video on this channel. And we are going to be reacting to
Hope my reaction is not freaking
three true scary sleepover stories. Let's get into that.
This happened when I was 15 years old. My best friend Anthony wanted me to come over for the night since his parents would be gone all.
I've seen this. No, alright, we have to do something. Here, let's just do the Home Alone one.
Okay.
Alright, screw the sleepover.
I was the only one home one Saturday night. I was sound asleep in my bed when I woke up and heard Siri on my phone talking. I turned it off, figuring it was just a glitch, and went back to sleep. An hour later, Siri woke me up again. I was a little freaked out now. Siri was responding to a strange sentence, "What that found for us?" And Siri's response was, "The answer is Thursday, July 4th, 1776. It was freaky as hell, but I still ended up dismissing it as a glitch. One more time, I woke up to Siri speaking.
Okay.
This time, the sentence that Siri was replying to was my full name, and her response was, "Here's the info for my name." At that point, I ran to my parents' room, locked the door, and slept in there. I still have doubts of whether it was really just a glitch.
You're not allowed to look away. Otherwise, you lose.
I was home alone, playing computer games at like 2 in the morning, when a knock came at my window. My head shot around to face the window, but there wasn't anyone there. It was winter, so I had my windows shut, and my room was on the first floor. I guess you can call me the unconfrontational gamer type, so all I did was just shut my blinds to let the pranksters know that I wasn't interested. Enough time passed where I was able to forget about the knocking and get back into my game, until another steady set of knocks came at the window. I was so uneasy now. Why were they doing this? Why couldn't they just leave me alone? But by the slim chance that they actually needed something, I lifted the blinds and pulled open my window just a crack.
Oh my God.
That was the biggest and most foolish mistake I'd ever made.
Of course.
2 hands from the darkness outside grabbed the bottom of the window and pushed it all the way up. I started screaming, throwing non-stop punches at the hooded man dressed in all black trying to enter my room. I grabbed the lamp sitting on my desk and bashed him in the head with it. He fell back outside, giving me the chance to shut my window.
Good job.
I saw him run away off our property into the darkness. I have never had a more horrifying experience. I lived way out in the country, like the turn off the paved road kind of country. I heard something crash on the roof and then smash into our metal chimney. For the next hour or so, I could hear it banging from inside the chimney, which should have been impossible since we had covered it for the summer. Then the front door started rattling as if someone was pulling on it, trying to get inside. I peered through the peephole but couldn't see anything. I finally threw open the door, and then everything stopped and went quiet.
So far, none of these are too intimidating.
I was home alone one day in the summer. I was doing the usual watching of movies in the living room when I heard some shuffling noises coming from above me. Our living room ceiling is super high, so the attic is the only room above it. I lowered the TV down a little. I could better hear the shuffling noises coming from up there. The attic was connected to my brother's bedroom through his closet. I went to his closet and opened the attic door. The light in there was broken, so I had to use a flashlight. I only made it about 2 steps in, before I heard the sound of the weak wooden floors across the attic creaking, and then the sound of something brushing up against one of the plastic bags on the floor. I jumped out of the attic, slamming the door shut and calling my parents. My dad had a look in there when he got home, but he didn't find anything. I'm just happy it's not my room that's connected to the attic.
Probably just your foot echoing across the attic.
Me and my dog Layla were home alone. I had the music turned up loud in my room, and yet I was still able to hear Layla barking like crazy at something. As I was leaving my room and walking downstairs, I heard Layla stomping down the basement stairs, still barking. I followed her, turning the basement light on. She was in an attack stance, barking at the closed door to the boiler room. I knocked on the door, asking if anyone was in there. Layla was going crazy at this point, jumping on the door, scratching it, basically trying to break it down. I decided that if something was really in there, I didn't want to see what it was. I dragged Layla by the collar all the way back upstairs and locked the basement door. When my dad got home, I made him check the boiler room, but on his way there, he saw that there was a ladder placed on the wall by the basement window, and the window had been smashed open. My dad called the police, sounding worried, but I didn't yet know what was going on. Turned out Layla was barking at an intruder, and that I should consider myself lucky that I didn't open that door. It was very common.
Okay.
I don't like that.
Here, because it's super boring watching just a bunch of pictures, we're gonna watch scary animated stories. Because then they actually, I don't know. I've watched like a couple of these before, but yeah. So you got hitchhiking, compilation, hitchhiking horror stories, house sitting horror stories. Let's do this one because this one's new. So, and I might have seen a couple.
Me too.
A couple weeks ago, my dad came home and pitched me a small job offer. One of his coworkers was going away for a few days and needed somebody he could trust to watch over his house.
Okay. I'm just gonna pause the video and wait for you to stop.
I'm looking. Fine.
Okay, let me shut it.
The reason my dad pitched this to me was because the man's house has a big CCTV system, basically a camera in every room, and then an operating desk where all screens could be watched on a big monitor. And I'm a computer science major, so my dad just always assumes that I know how to work anything technological. The man told my dad that he'd pay me $200 for the 2 days just to watch the house.
Really?
Whatever that meant. My dad drove me to the house and introduced me to the man, whose name doesn't matter. The man made it seem like he preferred I stay in the upstairs room with the monitors as opposed to roaming the house all day. That was fine with me though. So when I wasn't eating, I was mostly just sitting in that room with the TV on in the background and doing schoolwork on my laptop. Ironically, the thing I was doing the least was keeping an eye on the monitors. Night came. I started wondering where in the house I should sleep, since surprisingly, we hadn't discussed that. So I sat back down at the desk and looked at all the different rooms on the screens to see which rooms had beds or couches. I noticed something I wasn't expecting to notice though. The back screen door was open downstairs. I didn't remember it being open. I looked through each and every camera screen in a panic. In the living room, a closet door was open. This one I knew wasn't open earlier. I texted my dad to call the man and ask him if he came back home. Meanwhile, I continued watching the screen. On the grainy, dark image, a tall person who resembled only a black shadow on the screen stepped out from the closet. I pulled my arms off the desk as I covered my mouth with my hands in shock. As I did this, however, my left elbow pulled some heavy object from the desk onto the floor, creating a big thud. The person in the image very clearly moved their head up to the ceiling as a response to the noise. They went for the stairs, walking up very, very slowly, step by step.
Was him?
Meanwhile, I got a text back from my dad saying, "No, he's not. I just spoke to him half an hour ago. Why?" I got so caught up in my phone texting my dad to send help that I didn't even pay attention to the monitor.
You lose if you cover.
There was a knock at the door. I looked at it and then the screens. The first screen I laid my eyes on was the one showing the person outside the door to the room I was in.
You better have that
And I
lock.
remembered that door had no lock. The only thing I could think to do was jump out the window into the bushes below. I ran halfway down the block and then stopped when my dad called me. I had him call his friend and ask him if he was expecting somebody in the house. The man said he had no relatives or friends who had his key or would ever let themselves into his home. So he called the cops and had them review the footage. I got to watch all of it, and it showed everything. From the moment the intruder broke the glass to the backyard door, to the moment I jumped out the window and him running away shortly after.
Ah.
The intruder was never found.
Ah.
The footage was just too dark to identify his face.
Yeah, right. It's the night. It's nighttime.
Oh, God. Is the intruder the ghost? Is he the ghost?
Oh my god. It's a hitchhiking one. I don't know. It's not a ghost. There's no such thing.
But why are we watching it then? If there's
No.
3 months after I turned 16 in 2005, I got my first car, a 99 Toyota Camry. On a warm Saturday night, when my friend Alex invited me over to one of his friend's big parties, I knew I wouldn't be in a condition to drive the Camry home afterward. So we carpooled with Alex's girlfriend, Brianna. We lived in the countryside of Virginia, meaning less big parties. Meaning when there was a big party, it was a huge deal and everyone would go. We lived about 5 to 10 minutes away from this kid's house. I knew where he lived as I was acquainted with him, but not exactly friends. The whole ride there, we took the same 2-lane highway type road through the woods, and this kid's house was actually on this road further down. At certain points on this road, there were a few houses on either side, and then it would just go back to being a long, empty highway again. The house was tiny, like a lot of houses around the area, but the party was held outside anyways, since his closest neighbors were relatively far away, and noise wasn't an issue. I'll skip most of the party up until the point that Brianna, who was supposed to be our designated driver, had to suddenly leave for a small family emergency. Alex said it was fine and that we'd find a ride home.
Really?
Well, fast forward another few hours and another few drinks, and I could barely even walk straight.
Just
I checked my watch, and it was like 2 in the morning. I figured it was time to go. I started looking for Alex, but I couldn't find him anywhere. In fact, it seemed like everybody I knew had already left. I could barely even think straight, but I was still furious at the fact that Alex could have actually left without me. I asked to use the party host's phone and dialed Alex's home number. After 2 tries, I gave up and then realized I shouldn't wake his family up. So, literally not knowing what else to do, I dizzily stepped out onto the road and began walking back home. I knew this walk would take anywhere from half an hour to an hour in my condition.
I wouldn't even go to the party.
Maybe after 15 minutes of walking down the road, the slight shine of car headlights on the road was fading in from behind me. Jumping for joy inside, I lifted up my arm and stuck out my thumb. As the car neared, it slowed down and came to a stop right next to me. The man driving the '98 Ford Explorer rolled down the window and asked where you headed. I told him my house was just down the road and beyond a right turn, probably slurring my words beyond comprehension. He chuckled and told me to hop in. I thanked him and joyously hopped into the truck. I was exhausted, and I remember completely disregarding things the guy was asking me because I was so close to just passing out. And that's what happened. The memories of being in that truck turned to a fog as I'm sure I passed out.
Is it real, Sscary?
Yeah.
The next thing I remember, I woke up still in the moving truck. The guy looked at me and laughed, but didn't say anything. I looked around and realized the road we were on wasn't familiar. I nervously asked, where are we going? He then said, so what were you doing out this late anyway? As the man answered my very straightforward question with another irrelevant question, the sobering reality of the situation hit me. You can let me out anywhere, I told the man. The man responded with a firm no. I felt like throwing up as he said that. No, I really actually felt like I was going to throw up.
On his
I
face.
started to gag as I felt more and more nauseous by the second. The man took his eyes off the road to look at me, and that's when I thought of the perfect distraction. I turned in his direction as I continued to gag, and he started to kind of lean away and slow down the car.
It's the rat!
Thankfully, I drank as much as I did because I finally threw up and made a point of doing it all over the man's lap. The man yelled in frustration and stopped the car, and that's when I took it upon myself to run for my life into the woods and duck behind a few bushes. The man came following into the woods with a flashlight, and on 2 separate occasions, he shined the light straight over me without noticing. Eventually, I heard his footsteps walk even further into the woods past me. That was when I ran back to his truck, but unfortunately, he was smart enough to lock it. By some miracle, I saw another car approaching in the distance, and I ran out into the middle of the street, waving my arms like a lunatic. The car tried to avoid me, but I wouldn't let it. They were forced to stop, and I yelled at them to help me before they came back. Once I told them that I was kidnapped by the man who was driving that Ford Explorer, the driver agreed to give me a lift. Not to the police station or anything, but to my house. I made it back safely where I couldn't thank the driver enough. I immediately woke up my parents and told them. My dad wanted to know if I got his tag number, and then I felt like punching myself in the face. I failed to get the simplest information from the guy that would have allowed me to actually properly report him. All I knew was that he drove a faded blue '99 Ford Explorer.
Oh, but that car's
I made sure to give Alex a piece of my mind, and part of me always held a grudge against him ever since, just for abandoning me at a party without telling me.
Oh, yeah.
I haven't seen him in 4 years now, however, and this was actually the first time I even thought about this incident for almost a year now. As time goes on, even the worst of memories may start to fade, but after writing this to share with the internet, it's once again fresh in my mind.
What do you think of that?
Oh, I don't know. He's stupid to walk in the street to talk, and hopefully someone,
Yeah,
a good guy. You know, look at a good guy lift you up and drop you off. He's gonna kill you.
I mean, I wouldn't even go hitchhike anywhere.
It was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was almost over and spring break would finally be upon us, so everybody was getting antsy in their seats, I could tell. We didn't have a test that day like a lot of my friends did with their other teachers, so our teacher in the middle of class just decided to start playing games with us on Sporkle.com. He was a very laid-back teacher like that. As we were doing some brand logo quiz on Sporkle, I remember the exact moment it happened. Right after my friend answered a question, I remember the exact answer too, Adidas. The dean's voice came through the loudspeaker. He sounded panicked and frantic as he told all the teachers this was not a drill and to go into lockdown. I actually got the chills and I got goosebumps on my arms as our usually laid-back teacher too seemed panicked as he ran to turn off the lights and ushered us to the back corner of the room. We all sat in silence for about 2 minutes, and then the usual buzzing that came from a panel in the back of the room ceased, indicating that the school must have cut all the power. We all looked at each other, realizing this must be serious. A few more minutes of waiting later, we heard a man screaming at the top of his lungs coming down the hallway. 2 girls in the class actually started crying, which made all of us even more scared. As the screaming got closer to the classroom, the lunatic-sounding man started banging on the lockers while screaming, "I'll kill all of you." It was at that moment that I started to fear for my life. My teacher shushed us as we all looked at each other to see our peers' reactions. The banging then moved from the lockers to our classroom door, and that's when one of the crying girls screamed no. The banging on the door only grew worse as the man started screaming, "Open up." 2 of the girls in the class were crying out loud now. It felt like an eternity that man was pounding at the door, but eventually he finally continued down the hallway, screaming like a mentally insane person until we could not hear him anymore. I'd say 10 minutes later, though it felt like half an hour given the situation, the dean came back on the loudspeaker explaining the situation, which was surprising for him to do. He explained that some apparently mentally unstable person entered the building and assaulted the woman sitting at the front desk, causing her to flee the building screaming, and staff wasn't sure if the man was armed or not. Now this was before the school had cameras or could afford proper security, so the school was wide open to something like this happening. The staff had done a sweep of all the hallways and classrooms and couldn't find him, so the dean instructed the teachers to resume teaching but to keep all the doors locked and to not let any students leave for any reasons. The most disturbing part, however, is that one of the janitors working the night shift found the man sleeping in one of the storage closets near the back end of the school, and according to rumors that were spread by my peers, sticking out of his pocket was a .44 Magnum. The janitor must have done something stupid to wake him up, for example, leaving the closet door open, because by the time a police officer could arrive on the scene, the man was gone. My entire class, as far as I know, to this day, has no idea if this man was ever found, but I like to think that right now, he's being given the proper help that he needs.
Like, punishment. You know, proper, like,
No, I know the proper is, but like, no, I think that's not true.
I've seen this one. I actually see a lot of things. I don't know. This one looks. Not this one. The dude. No.
And the sheet.
I was out doing a delivery one late night.
Oh, I've seen this one. Really.
I had the animated. It's so contrast.
Here, I think it's this one.
I was sure there was some kind of animal living in my walls. I just had to figure out how to get rid of it.
I've seen like every one of this. I'm not joking. Like, it's kind of weird.
Everyone of them?
The next morning,
Kimberly, you stabbed me right in my back. You know that shit you did was so wild. Girl, you always making me mad.
These guys. Nightmares that reason.
I was having a horrifying dream, possibly the most disturbing nightmare of my life. I was in my house, or the closest thing to my house that my dream could produce. Ironically enough, I was in bed in this dream, or at least I can only start remembering past the point of my lying in bed, and all of a sudden, the sound came from downstairs. I walked downstairs in the dark, not turning on any lights, to where I thought the sound was coming from. I was on my middle floor now. The dream was telling me to go downstairs to my laundry room, and so I did. But as I got there, expecting the noise to be louder and closer, it sounded like it was just as far as before. Now I was going upstairs to the kitchen, and it's strange, outside of every window was complete blackness, not general nighttime darkness. There was nothingness. I think all that existed in this dream was my house. Now my dream started to suggest that the banging sounds were coming from upstairs, so I went back upstairs and was eventually led to the attic door. It was surely beyond that door. I opened it. There was an old woman standing by a bunch of boxes. She was slowly but loudly slamming her hand on one of the boxes, producing an unnatural sound. I tried to quietly step back away from the attic, but the old woman turned around, opened her mouth twice as wide as anyone humanly could, reached out her arms, began to scream, and leaped toward me. That's when I woke up. I thought it was just a horrific dream, but when I heard a bang coming from downstairs, a bang similar to what I heard in my dream, I felt my heart completely drop. On my way downstairs, there was another bang. It was the front door. I got the butcher knife from my knife holder in the kitchen and crouched behind the door. I was waiting for the next time he would pound on the door and I would warn him to go away. I waited for a good minute in silence and finally decided to take a quick look through the window.
No.
There was somebody standing in my driveway. I couldn't tell if he was facing me or looking at me or not, but he was surely the one who was pounding on my door at 4 in the morning. He walked away down the sidewalk moments after he must have noticed me. The pounding on my door was the kind of pounding you would expect from someone trying to break in a door, not to get a house owner's attention. I thought it was just crazy and horrifying that the pounding and banging from this potential robber or killer didn't wake me up, rather became the key point to a horrifying dream.
See, if he got in, you would have been dead. You would have been.
Ever since I can remember, we've always had one of those old vintage Parker Brother Ouija boards sitting in our closet collecting dust. When I was a kid, I always wondered what it was. From the box, it seemed like a horrible board game, until one day I found out what a Ouija board really is, and immediately dug it out of the closet. I insisted on my brother trying it out with me, and eventually got him to play along. We put our hands on the planchette, and I began asking the typical cliche questions like, is there anybody there? And, can you answer me? Other than my brother jokingly moving the planchette around to imitate an answer from some kind of entity, there was no real response.
They actually believe it.
After getting bored, we put the game back in the box. I did a little research that night to find out how to make Ouija boards work. Many people said online that the most ideal environment when using a Ouija board is in a dark room only lit by candles. So when my parents weren't home, I managed to gather like 6 or 7 candles and convinced my brother to try it one more time. I lit the candles and set them around the table in the dining room with all the lights out. We tried one more time. I asked again if there was anybody there. The planchette began to move. I told my brother to stop moving it, but he swore he wasn't. I told him to move his hand away, and he did. It kept moving. My brother thought I was messing with him, but I didn't pay attention. The planchette landed on the word yes. I was only 9, so I was legitimately shitting myself. My older brother had to take over. He asked the question, "Are you a good spirit?" There was a 5-second pause before my brother's hand moved along with the planchette to the word no. We both looked at each other, and at this point I ran to my room and shut the door behind me, but he continued on with the so-called game. I heard his muffled voice come from down in the dining room, when all of a sudden I heard him screaming at the top of his lungs. I ran back downstairs to see what was wrong. He was holding up his shirt, revealing a small open wound that almost looked like a claw mark.
Yeah.
He told me to set the fireplace immediately, and I obeyed. He threw the thing in the fireplace and told me to never speak of what happened to anybody. We have never used a Ouija board since.
It was like a new scar. Or maybe it was an old scar.
I'm 27 years old. I live alone in a rural town in Virginia, about 2 blocks away from my parents. My parents are both in their 60s, and my mom has become a very worrisome woman in her old age. Sometimes she walks over uninvited and lets herself in, since I had regrettably given her a key, which can get a bit annoying. Like if I would be out really late on weekends at a bar or with women, I would sometimes come home to my mom sitting in the living room waiting, worried sick. I know you may just think, oh my god, that's crazy, why not just put your foot down and tell her to stop? Well, because you don't know my mom. It's very hard to describe her, but she's the kind of worrisome, innocent little lady that you just can't bring yourself to go against. And I hate to mention, she also has mild dementia. Anyway, this was Saturday night. I think it was around 2 in the morning. I was at a nearby club with a group of college friends, really the only place to hang out in this boring town, and I was getting ready to head home. I said goodbye to all my friends and walked the 3 blocks it took to get back to my house. I walked up my front stoop in my drunken haze and dug my hand in my pocket for my keys.
Of course he has to be.
When I grabbed the doorknob, I realized it was unlocked. My mom was here again. I quietly opened and shut the front door, locking it behind me. I put my keys on the kitchen counter and found a note written in my mom's handwriting saying, "You forgot this at our house, next to the box of half-eaten cake my parents didn't want." I didn't see my mom anywhere, so I assumed she must have gone upstairs to sleep in the guest bed until I got back, which is something she would commonly do as well.
No.
Then I heard footsteps upstairs, confirming it, and that's when I sighed once again. 27 years old, almost 3 in the morning, and she still has to wait up and treat me like a child. I ran upstairs to check the guest bed. Empty, along with all the bathrooms.
Ah!
I was afraid Mom was having one of her episodes due to her condition, so I ran to the phone to call my dad. After 4 rings, my dad picked up in a groggy voice, asking what the hell is the matter.
Like a woman.
After I told him that I heard Mom wandering around upstairs in my house, there was a short pause, and then he said, "That's not possible, she's sleeping right next to me." My mouth fell open as I turned my head to face the dark upstairs, and just barely by the light provided by the kitchen, I could see a head peering around from the corner at the top of the stairs, looking down at me. I screamed into the phone as I ran out the front door and down the street to my parents' house, explaining to my father on the way. About halfway there, my dad told me, "Alright, I'm gonna call the cops," and hung up. I made it to my parents' house, where my mom was already waiting at the door, worried sick. My mom explained that she did come over to clean my kitchen a little bit and to bring over the cake they didn't want. 2 police cars pulled up in front of my parents' house, where they escorted me and my dad down the street to my house. 1 officer stayed outside with us, while 2 others went inside to investigate. It felt like 15 minutes before they came back outside and said it was clear. They checked the crawl space, the attic, everything. There was really nothing for me to report, other than the door was left unlocked and I saw the outline of a head upstairs before I ran for it. Still, I didn't feel safe sleeping in there that night, so I went back to my parents' house. Me and my dad are certain that my mom simply forgot to lock the door when she left, as her memory has been getting worse over the past few months. My dad has been stopping her from coming over alone from now on, which makes me both sad but also relieved. Some nights, I still get paranoid that whoever was in my house that night never left, and is still hiding in here somewhere.
I'm Carly Kloss, and I just created my site with Wix.
Go to Wix.com to create your stunning website today.
We don't
Here
want
somewhere.
again with don't do a jump scare. Don't do a jump scare. I actually really hate jump scares. Not the same
It
one.
was a typical boring day in calculus, only it was Friday, 7th period, meaning the week was over. We all sat in silence.
No, we're not doing this. We already saw it. Jesus, how long is this? Look at this. Huh. Look at my cat.
And I'm a photographer. I took a trip last year with my wife to the Colorado mountains for an art project. My wife is also an avid skier, so she talked me into adding skiing into the trip. We had
Okay. Now we're waiting.
Stupid guys.
the option to book a room at a ski resort or rent out a private log cabin. The second one seemed more romantic, so I picked that one. Plus, it didn't hurt that it was cheaper. The cabin was nothing luxurious or anything. It was a single floor, 4-room little thing. A 2-person bedroom, a small living room, a kitchen, and a bathroom. It may have been small, but the actual idea of being secluded in a warm log cabin during a blizzard was amazing. However, the storm was interfering with the cable signal, so we didn't have much to do this one particular evening. It was just starting to get dark out at this point, but there was still a decent amount of light outside, so I thought it would be perfect for getting a few shots and videos in the blizzard for backgrounds and wallpapers. I told my wife I'd be back within 10 minutes and slipped on my boots and coat. The moment I stepped outside and shut the door, I noticed footsteps leading up to the door in the snow that had blown under the wooden awning. I could see the prints doubled, as whoever left them there turned and went the opposite direction. I was freaked the fuck out, but I wasn't about to go inside and scare my wife. I decided to give in to my curiosity and followed the prints to the right side of the cabin. Right away, I noticed that they led to the bedroom window. My heart froze in fear when I saw this. I could see my wife sitting on the bed using her iPad. She noticed me and I waved. She laughed. I continued to follow the footprints around the cabin to the other side. They led to the living room window on the other side. Someone was stalking us, but how long ago was the question? I found myself standing there for a good minute asking myself if I should follow the footprints anymore.
No.
For whatever reason, I decided I would. They were now leading away from the cabin. I knew I was following the prints to where this person was going, not coming from, simply by the boot marks. I followed the prints away from the opening and into the trees. That was where I saw him. A man wearing a black coat facing a tree, slouched down looking at the ground. He was still as a statue, and I could see the snow piling up on his hood and shoulders. I froze in my tracks, trying not to make a sound. I would have thought to ask him if he needed help otherwise, but this guy was just standing there not doing anything, like some kind of deranged freak. I started to gradually move backwards without even turning around, making sure this man didn't turn around or notice me. When I got at a visual distance, I turned around and stomped through the snow back to the cabin. When I slammed the door shut, my wife came over to see what was wrong. I saw worry in her eyes. I guess she saw the worry in mine. She knew I saw something, and after a few minutes of harassment, I finally told her what I saw. She immediately started packing her things, telling me we're leaving right away.
Right.
I told her no, we're not going anywhere. I would not get a refund for leaving early, and I wasn't about to up and leave just because some weird guy was walking around outside. She made a point of locking both locks on the door and making sure all of the windows were sealed shut. For the rest of the night, we read stuff on our iPads. I reviewed the pictures and videos I had taken so far.
Oh, you kids?
We turned out the lights early as there wasn't much else to do.
No, keep them on.
What if he's still out there? I remember my wife asking me. There's no way he's still out there, I then assured her. Listening to the wind blowing outside, along with the small flakes of snow hitting the windows, was strangely relaxing, and I knew I'd be able to fall asleep quickly. Except if it wasn't for the knock at the bedroom window.
Very normal.
We were both still awake, and we both knew it was a knock from a person. I ushered my wife out of bed and out into the living room without turning on any lights. There was nothing to use as a weapon whatsoever. Our only option was to run before something might happen. I told my wife we'd have to forget our luggage and make a dash for the Jeep. We slipped on our boots and coats in the dark in a matter of seconds, and when we heard a knock at the living room window from the opposite side of our car, we took that opportunity to run. I pressed the unlock button, so grateful I chose to have remote locks on my Wrangler, and we hopped in. The car started with ease, and as soon as the headlights flashed on, the man was standing facing the log cabin on our side now. Not a window, just facing the wall of the cabin in the same position I had seen him in earlier, as if he were hiding his face. We drove to the nearby ski resort without much trouble in the Jeep. We stayed there for the night and went back the next day to the log cabin to collect our things we left behind. He wasn't there.
Well, I don't think it's real. I think that is real.
Yeah.
There.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's gonna be it. Video reactions. Bye.